Welcome, William Ramsey.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. Glad to be here.
Me too. So thanks for talking to me about this. So, right after the Emmys were over, I got a direct message from you of the selfie of the Central Park Five at the Emmys. These once convicted, now they vacated their conviction. One judge vacated it, and they are at the Emmys, partying it up, being fully celebrated. I mean, it was. I'm glad I got the text message from you, but it's disturbing to see. No.
Yeah, absolutely. Totally disturbing because it's still not, there's a significant amount of people, including the arresting officers, who believe that they were involved in, well, the rape and close to near murder of the Central Park jogger. So I think that to see them in the limelight with Ava DuVernay, I think was very disturbing.
Yeah, very, very disturbing. And also, just the idea, I kept having a fantasy like, well, what if they showed instead of clips from When They See Us, what if they showed clips from the confession? Do
Great,
you,
great
do you
point.
think people would be throwing tomatoes? Or, I mean,
Absolutely. They probably wouldn't want to be in their presence if they actually saw the confessions that were in there, the non-coerced confessions, which Ava DuVernay keeps restating in public interviews that they were coerced confessions. But if you look at the police procedural activities, the parents were there, they were invited there, they confessed, and so or confessed to being involved. So it's kind of grotesque to see them with these Hollywood luminaries partying it up.
and do you think that it has anything to do with the fact that legally, I mean, we didn't even see this with the Central Park Five. I mean, with the West Memphis Three, all we saw was Damien Eccles and maybe Johnny Depp together on a red carpet. But this kind of celebration publicly, I don't remember seeing in any of these kind of award shows for them.
No,
Do
I
you think
don't.
that has anything to do with the fact that they pled guilty to get out, or?
Well, oh, in what way? For the West Memphis Three or for the Central Park Five? Well, yeah, I think that the West Memphis Three, Damien Eccles seemed to like the limelight. I think he was at the Golden Gods Awards at the with the invite of Marilyn Manson at one point of 2012, 2013. So he did have a little bit of some type of limelight, but I think the West Memphis. I think that in the Central Park Five case, the propaganda and a very slick, well produced video on Netflix pretty much convinced everybody that there was an injustice. And I think that, I mean, at this point, if we look at all these other cases we're going to talk about tonight, I think that the odds are against really the legal system itself in a general sense that these processes can be second guessed, third guessed, and re-guessed about 20 times until the public reaches a tipping point and believes that the judicial process was not due process, that it was rigged in one way or the other. And I think that that's the case in the Central Park Five, is that if you asked everybody in Hollywood on the street whether they were involved or not, I bet 9 out of 10 would say, oh yeah, it was, they were coerced and they were innocent black guys framed by the police. I think they would believe that. I think they would honestly believe that.
Wow.
Don't you think?
Wow. Yeah, I think so. I had when I was researching the case, and it was just haunting my nightmares. It's really one of the worst cases I've ever researched, because the cruelty in it is they really just went out to rob joggers and bicyclists and ended up raping a woman for fun. And they enjoyed it. They enjoyed the terror and the cruelty, and it's such a dark, dark, dark case. And
Yeah.
to read, parts of the confession where they're asking, did the jogger say anything? And one of them saying, yes, she said help.
Wow.
And it's just like the worst, most nightmarish things you could ever imagine. And
Yeah.
I understand not, wanting to kind of bury it and pretend it never happened, but it's such a reversal. And a lot of my friends who are very faithful say, well, this is the, kind of ultimate expression of Satanism, where Linda Fairstein, who was really a crusader for women who were victims of sex crimes, now she's being portrayed as, the devil incarnate, terrible person. They wanted to relook at all of her cases, which thankfully were denied from the 70s to 2002. I mean, it's crazy.
Can you imagine?
And, it just feels very, backwards, whereas these heroes really are villains. And
right. No, it's an excellent point.
The heroes are being portrayed as villains, so it's bizarre.
And I think that the way DuVernay approached her pseudo, film, mockumentary or whatever it is Fairstein was really put out in the beginning as the malevolent, framer of the 5 innocent young boys, the innocent, music-loving, just happened to be at the park at night, running through, in the wrong place at the wrong time. That's the way it's portrayed, as much as I could watch. I really had trouble watching that. I've seen so many really horrible murders, but for me, it was almost like blasphemy how little importance the truth had in that show. When They See Us, it was incredible. Nominated for 15 Emmy nominations, and I think one of the lead actors won, so it did win one award.
Right, and then they keep saying, when he won his award, the actor Jarrell Jerome, he dedicated it to Corey Wise, who he played, as if he was like some, incredible person, and called them the exonerated. It's like this mantra, just keep calling them like, I don't know, it makes me think of 1984 kind of, newspeak type thing. Just keep saying it over and over.
Don't you think that it's a PR technique these guys have used? Because in the West Memphis 3, almost every written piece on the West Memphis 3 or Damien Echols convicted for a crime he didn't commit. Every time. It's almost the same phrase. So I think that's really it's a PR technique to really hit people with that one sentence, simple to remember mantra or phrase that negates any of their culpability.
Yeah, and what do you think about the two prosecutors, Linda Fairstein and Elizabeth Lederer, not saying anything? I mean, is that...
Well, I feel like they have said they've written some things in response to to When They See Us, and I do think that Fairstein tried to come out, but nobody wanted to listen. Much like, people don't want to listen to Eric Reynolds, the arresting officer. He could barely find an audience to talk about. I did an interview with him. He's been on a few shows, but once that narrative is created that these guys were unjustly convicted, any contradictory statements, I think, are perceived as kind of like, oh, this is a fascistic supporter of a tyrannical legal system that's put together to illegally arrest, black people. I think that's really what it is. So I don't think people even look at the facts of what the police gather, either in the West Memphis 3 case or in the Central Park 5 case or some of these other cases. It's incredible, especially when it's readily available.
Aren't they using Oprah? Because, Oprah says they're exonerated and we should all refer to them as the exonerated 5. Then, her good name, it's like her, like when she had the O list or whatever, her stamp of approval on these.
Well, she's a little more interesting. She was the one who financed When They See Us. Did you know that?
Yes, I told you what I knew when I worked at Oprah Magazine was that she didn't want to do any articles about people in prison for any kind of, we're not talking murderers, lower charges, because she felt like she'd been burned by them before and that they'll never change. But I think she kind of changed her song when she needed parts, and Ava DuVernay was willing to cast her in almost everything, right?
Interesting. Because I was going to say, like, Ava DuVernay is, in my opinion, a very activist filmmaker, so she's really trying to create propagandistic films in all of her films, really, because I saw I think I told you this before, was it the 13th Amendment, and so, she's definitely got a track record, I would say.
Yeah, Oprah has said some interesting and controversial things about, I just remember one talk I went to when I was at Oprah where she said, about how her mother had said to her when she was older that she was going to clean one day for really nice white people. And that's like was her grandmother's biggest dream. I think it was her grandmother's biggest dream for her. And she says, and then she says to the audience, and now I have a lot of really nice white people working for me. Sure. And I just always found it it was just like a very interesting moment. And I know that she got some flack for saying that. So, I don't know. It's hard to tell what her politics are at all. She really seems to kind of have a talent for riding with whatever the, mainstream opinion is.
Interesting. I mean, I think she also did this new Michael Jackson documentary as well. Didn't she produce that?
Yeah, after being close with Harvey Weinstein and David Geffen, right, and a couple other people who've been brought up in the Me Too movement. I thought that was interesting, and it came right on the tail of all the, Father, what is it, Father John?
Yao of God. Or
John of God,
yes.
Yes, thank you, John of God. Which I know, because I was at the magazine at the time, there's a lot of us who were very disturbed that she was promoting him. And she continued to promote him, even going to his healing clinic. And what that guy is alleged, I don't know what happened with that story, but is alleged at one point, one woman came out and said that he have some kind of baby making factory. Yeah. Baby farm, right. Very similar to what Epstein wanted to do.
Right. Well, the worst thing about his baby farm is after the woman had enough babies, the rumor is he would kill them. Did you hear that? Yeah. So very dark. And he's friends with Abramovich. So she keeps company with some pretty sketchy characters. Geffen, Weinstein, Yao of God. Did you see Weinstein confronted the other day when he was in New York City? Did you see those videos?
I thought that was great. I think we are way too polite just as people. I thought it was fantastic. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you for speaking up, woman.
I know.
Very good.
I was surprised there was only 2 people that were outraged, frankly. I mean, especially with the allegations of what he's been up to for the last decades. But her comment off the top, I think she had to have ad-libbed it that she would have needed a rape whistle and mace. Who would have thought that she would have gone to an actor's studio and needed rape whistle and a mace? So kudos to her. I mean, it takes a lot of courage.
Really? And, so here's like a thing they do. I mean, I know you've done a few episodes on the Central Park 5. Have you been called a racist?
I got called a racist on the YouTube channel within an hour about 3 times. So I didn't know you were a racist, William Ramsey. I mean, the funny thing is that, like, I contradicted the West Memphis 3 for years. I still contradict the prevailing narrative, and I haven't been called a hater of white trash or white people yet. So it's just another, it's another feather in my cap as far as all of my other insults: witch hunter, lunatic, conspiracy theorist, racist. So just these days don't mean much. Doesn't mean much.
It's interesting because one woman commented that she was very concerned about the amount of shows I was doing about black men raping white women. And I was like, well, by large amount, you mean 2 of the 87 or 86 shows I've done? I mean,
some people have their own particular axe to grind. So
yeah, it's very interesting, though, that these cases are always attached to some kind of cause. So Central Park 5 were victims of racism. The West Memphis 3 were victims of satanic panic.
Right. What Adnan Syed is probably anti-Muslim, right?
That's right. Even though 9/11 hadn't happened yet, people just hated Muslims at that point for no reason, I guess.
And then making a murder is what...
That's a large complete police conspiracy, yes. I would think, or you could say some kind of classism, even though they had a salvage yard and seemed to be doing okay. it depends on how you paint it. And then Amanda Knox is a victim of slut shaming. I mean, I say all this ironically, slut shaming
Right.
and anti-Americanism. I mean, can you have these movements for murderers or convicted rapists without some kind of cause?
I don't think so. I think that you have to apply it to something and then affix some injustice to that. That's really it. So, yeah, it's just so there's just so many of these cases going on. This Amanda Knox is still going on, West Memphis 3, Central Park 5, and I think Nan Syed has kind of died on the vine. But these other guys are still operating, and people are still talking about him to this day. I mean, Ken Kratz is still on Twitter defending himself every day against this herd. I mean, it's just I feel sorry for that guy. Holy smokes! You interviewed him.
I admire him so much for it because I think it really changed the narrative. Him getting out in front of it and defending his conviction.
Convictions, yeah.
I think it was a good thing. Otherwise, I mean, I think we'd have Making a Murderer, like really
16.
real people supporting it. 16 by now,
Yeah.
I mean, I think it's really. And as far as Adnan goes, the last event they had in Baltimore, they were supposed to have 1,000 people there, and about 45 showed up.
Yeah,
So,
I think you sent me that picture, right?
yeah.
Like
First it was supposed to be 1,000 seat, then it went to 250, and then about, maybe 40 people, 45 showed up max.
Well, that's
So-
good news. I mean, that's good news. Adnan Syed is guilty as sin.
So here's my other question, though. When something like that happens where a caused us, I guess who was an Adnan supporter was that guy from John Cryer was a Adnan supporter.
Right.
I think he still is.
Right.
So what happens when it becomes not fashionable anymore? Do you get another case to take its place? And what is this about Kim Kardashian supporting all these convicted murderers?
Well, that's a two-part question. So I think the first thing is that when you bet on a horse that isn't going to win, you select another horse quietly and don't tell anybody. So you just pivot right away. So isn't Cryer making or behind a film that's I can't remember, his production company is involved with I can't remember which film it is. I think he's doing another documentary or something. I vaguely remember that. Do you know anything about that?
I don't.
Okay, so I gotta look that up. But okay, so the Kim Kardashian is a long story because she's been in the news all year supporting all these different people, and I talked with you in the pre-show about the 4 convicted killers that she is now touting as innocent. So in California, it's Kevin Cooper. In Oklahoma, it is a guy by the name of Julius Jones. And then there's another guy by the name of Kevin Keith. I think that's Pennsylvania. And then the last one is, these are all convicted murderers. And then there's Rodney Reed that you have done a show on in Texas. So all these guys are on. And I've done the research into Kevin Cook. I've read all the court documents are readily available, easily accessed. And this guy is guilty as sin. There's overwhelming evidence he is on death row and merits to be on death row. And I've read the court documents, so it's pretty obvious.
So what's Kim Kardashian's position on the case?
Well, she wants a complete exoneration. She thinks that she's going the new DNA testing route, kind of the West Memphis 3 thing. So she wants additional DNA testing when there's already been DNA testing. And people, for the background of the case, Kevin Cooper was an escaped convict. He actually had 3 names. So he came out of Pennsylvania. He was a very clever person as far as working the system, because when he get arrested in Pennsylvania, he would feign mental illness and then get put in a psychiatric facility that had lower standards of or lower protocols of security, and then he'd escape. So he had been out of 12 different institutions by the time these murders took place in Chino Hills. So it was in San Bernardino. He was in, I think, the Chino Hills facility and left and stayed in an abandoned house that was in Chino Hills, and it was called the Lease Home. and across the street were the victims of his rampage, the Ryans, Ryen. And what happened is he was basically kind of stalking, and he was trying to get away from Chino Hills, and he murdered in cold blood 4 people, and there's supposed to be a 5th that was going to die. One of the younger sons, I think it was Josh Ryan was his name, survived like hatchet attacks. It was really brutal, up close murders, and so that's really the background of the case. Reason he got arrested is he was in Santa Barbara and raped a woman, and she recognized the face for a wanted poster of what happened in Chino Hills, what they thought was his involvement, and that's how he knew it. So he was kind of a rapist, burglar, in and out of the system. So his background, he had already been, I think, convicted of 2 felonies, burglary felonies, before these murders that took place in Chino Hills. I think the date of that was, it's funny, his fake names were David Troutman, Chico Gaines, and Angel Jackson. So he had these different names. The
Chico? He's going after Mark's brother's name? Okay.
Yeah, so it was 34 years. What was it? I'm trying to figure out the date. The date of his, it was, I think it was 94, 93. So it was a while back. I mean, let's see. What was the date? I don't have the facts in front of me, but yeah. So anyway, so Kim Kardashian thinks that he deserves a full exoneration.
So what is Kim Kardashian getting out of this, you think?
Fame. She gets a little, signaling of her divine nature and how she's really looking out for people who got the short end of the stick. Her meeting with Kevin Cooper, a convicted murderer, ended with a group hug, so that was cute. There's a picture of her being hugged by him. So, yeah. He's a pretty scary guy. And so that was one, yeah. So she's around. Also, Kim Kardashian seems to be wanting to be a law student. So she is now like studying to be an attorney and involved in all these innocence cases. So we'll see how everything works out.
I mean, that seems like quite a lofty goal for someone, with kids and big career and everything. But okay, it's just strange to me, as a woman, and I have to think, I don't know, to always be on the side of someone who's like murdered someone or raped someone, but I've obviously, I don't know. I can't get in her head. I don't know if she really thinks they're innocent or guilty, or if she thinks they're innocent. Then she's pushing aside any of the more critical information. It's very strange to me.
Yeah, well, the strange thing, too, is that all this information is readily available online. So you can go and read all of these clemency hearing materials, the California Supreme Court decision, and they just keep repeating this case has been tried over and over again. It sounds like that other case that Bob Ruff is working on. Which case was that?
Jamie Snow,
right. So that's another case where like the evidence of guilt is overwhelming.
Yeah, just from his own mouth. I mean, it's not, had he not opened his mouth, it would have been a much, much thinner case, but he told everybody he knew pretty much that he did it.
Right.
So it's kind of strange that way. And I guess I was asking, I guess Lynn Hartman, who I'd done an episode with, she was engaged to Stephen Avery, and I was asking her just privately, like, why do women support these violent men who hurt women? And she said, they're not looking at it like that. They think it's this great injustice. And I said, well, is it because women are more mothering that they're just kind of trying to like almost like take care of these guys? And she says, no, it's just sort of like this, like what you're saying, kind of like virtue signaling, caring about an injustice, that kind of new identity, like a crusader for justice, but it couldn't be. And I wonder if some of it is that we're so far removed from death in this culture. Do you think
like
that has anything
I think
to do
that's
with
true.
it?
Like they don't comprehend the enormity of what they did to other people. And I think somebody who was complaining against Kim Kardashian said, why don't you read one of the surviving family members' testimony, So it seems like she didn't read it. But I think that she's really kind of like an example of the larger innocence fraud movements and mobocracy online of people who come to these conclusions thinking that they're Oliver Wendell Holmes and they can figure out these cases just by listening to a one paragraph PR blurb.
That's such a good point, because do you think that's also kind of like a real American idea that the novice could do it better than the professional, like with the novice's passion, or the, the amateur passion, or just someone from the street, like, oh, I don't know, who am I thinking of? I'm thinking of the movie with, help me, with Julia Roberts, where she's like going testing well water.
Right.
Erin Brockovich.
Aaron
Right. So she's better than all the lawyers at her job, being, whatever, doing whatever,
right.
being a mom or whatever.
I think that's a chance, and also maybe some of these people didn't have the chance to go get a PhD, or they felt slighted by academia or slighted by people with academic credentials, and they're going to show them that they can do it just as good as they could, or we can figure it out, and I'm going to take the lead on this. So I think that's definitely plausible. And, I've thought a lot about Bob Ruff, and in my opinion, that's what comes to mind with him, is that I can figure it out, and I'm going to find a little wrinkle in this that's going to be a bombshell and flip the whole case upside down. And you look at his cases that he's handled, and it's almost like that's what he has for each one of those cases, is this bombshell, whether it's the police who perjured himself, or the time card in Adnan Syed, or all these things. There's one thing that invalidates all of the other facts and evidence, and I've got it figured out. So, and what's amazing too is a lot of people believe that too. So it's a mix for me of like mobocracy, idiocracy, and also kind of maybe a feeling of the underclass that like they can outwit like certain people. Like, I don't go to do surgery at a doctor's office. I don't have a surgical background. I don't think I can do brain surgery. But some of these people think that they can outthink somebody at an appellate court and, really add different stuff to that material. And that's it's pretty scary, actually.
Yeah. And yet so few of them, I think Bob Ruff doesn't spend any time in court. I don't think very, very rarely do I hear he's been in court.
And it's an interesting dynamic, too, because I think that the courts themselves are kind of august bodies. They're removed from the media. They don't PR themselves. They do not engage in public discord. And I think that in the modern age, with so much activity to social media, that's a negative in the current social climate, because people can't really comprehend them without, why don't they have an Instagram account? Why doesn't the Supreme Court of California have an Instagram account where I can understand this? So I think that they may not just be able to grasp the kind of training and kind of hierarchical nature of the legal profession and what it takes to actually ascend to even a state Supreme Court is it's a high achievement, and it takes a specific type of person to attain that and to do that work. It's very rigorous, intellectually rigorous, but also, you have to really be intelligent and have achieved these steps in the ladder: 3 years of law school, passing the bar. You do other cases, you earn repute within the profession, then you get called up. So it seems like people don't really understand that. It doesn't seem like the rank and file Americans really appreciate that, and they should. They really should.
And you're always greeted with sort of generality. Well, you don't believe someone could get wrongly convicted. You don't believe that. Of course, I believe that someone could get wrongly convicted, but do I believe it's as common as we're often led to believe by the innocence movement? No.
Right, I agree with that. I've heard from varying different people that every person in death rows in any state prison always says they're innocent. So there could be 30 people on death row in Arkansas or whatever. Each one is proclaiming their innocence because they have to. So does that mean that because that one person who's been found guilty is proclaiming innocence is true? How do you find out whether that's true? You got to look at the police record and the court record, and in so many of these cases, they're available. They're all available.
if you're Jason Flom and you have what does he have? The Wrongly Convicted podcast. That's the guy who used to run a record company and now has the Church of Rock and Roll in New York with Damien Eccles being a priest. I don't know, he's a priest of the church or some kind of person in the Church of Rock and Roll is marrying people. And this guy believes everyone who says to him, I'm innocent. He's had him on a show and seems to, I don't know if there is a person he doesn't believe is innocent. It's amazing. I've never seen anything like it.
So I think that's really it. They're kind of like the legal profession moves slow. You know, the life of the law is experience, and I think that not just the profession, but really the judiciary in the context of this new media that's popping around about them, where people who aren't trained can sit around and chat and talk. And I think that's really one of the key themes in the Truth is Justice podcast, where I forgot the guy's name, but he's constantly saying, like, these people are untrained. They don't know what the importance of an evidentiary hearing is. They don't know what the rules of evidence are. How do they even...
Oh, yeah, Sam.
Sam, yes.
Yeah.
So how can they even...
Sam Carroll.
Yeah, Sam Carroll, thanks. So I haven't listened to all of his stuff, but I think he's making great points. And I think that he got on the record to contradict a lot of Bob Ruff's inaccuracies. So... I think that's really, I think you're in a really unique environment, really, as far as the judiciary is concerned, where the public can really have access. I mean, do you know how hard it was maybe even 50 years ago to go get the court cases and sit down in a law library? These were all impediments to the rank and file person from looking at stuff, but now you can just get bad PR, right away. You can go on some of these shows. I mean, these shows, whether it's Dr. Phil or Piers Morgan or The View, do a terrible job looking at these cases. It takes 5 minutes. Yeah, just wretched. I mean,
it's so cold. It's so dismissive of it, your own critical thinking. I mean, the way Dr. Phil approached the Rodney Reed case was, I'm Dr. Phil. I'm kind of a human lie detector person with all my background. I'm going to go look this convicted murderer, rapist in the eye, and I'll see if he's telling the truth and ask him the hard questions. He didn't ask him the hard questions. He asked him the easy, basic questions about the case, and then voila, declared that he was, telling the truth, and basically rubber stamped it for his audience, and is sending out petitions on Twitter and everything to support this guy who, brutally raped many 12-year-old and many other women, and in addition killed Stacey Stites and raped her, and is on death row. But so my question about the death row thing is, are death row, like the West Memphis 3 case was a death row case because Damien Eccles was on, death row.
Right.
Are those activists, do they know they're lying, and is it just by any means necessary?
That's a good question. I think that some of the real core members in some of these cases know that the person is guilty, and that's my own personal opinion. But I think they've attached themselves to these cases for either grand juror or for financial reasons. But then they're able to kind of latch on. Like I would say almost like in the West Memphis 3 case, those core members all probably knew that Eccles was involved in something untoward, but they were willing to just go along with it to get a fellow traveler out of jail. So I think that in a lot of these cases, some of these people do know. I think that some of them have gotten a bad understanding of who these people were. Most of these people have prior records. Damien Eccles' prior record is almost never mentioned. It certainly isn't mentioned in the documentaries, but also Reed and this other guy, Cooper. These guys all were involved in all kinds of malfeasance that the people who are making comments on their case don't know.
Mm-hmm. And so what about Mumia Abu-Jamal and Leonard Peltier? So Leonard Peltier was a Native American. It depends on who you talk to. Some people say he was an activist. Some say he was just sort of like a bodyguard for the reservation, the Pine Ridge Reservation in South Dakota. He killed 2 FBI agents. And then he's had supporters like U2, the Dalai Lama, David Geffen, and Danny Glover, Amnesty International. And he also did a prison break in 1979 that left one inmate dead. But he's apparently running for vice president this year from prison. Do you think that his supporters and Mumia Abu-Jamal, who killed a officer, Daniel Faulkner, do you think that those cases are popular with radicals because they feel like the killing a police officer isn't wrong, or killing two FBI agents isn't wrong?
I would say that those are both like radical cases for radicals to get behind for sure. I think Peltier and Abu Jamal actually typify those kind of radical support cases where they look past the facts and see them as, warriors against the man, so they'll be willing to fight against anything. I don't know how a police officer giving a traffic ticket is some kind of front soldier for a fascist state, but I don't know, maybe the FBI, whatever. But I do think that's it. And so the celebritization of the culture, most people will latch on and say, if the guys from Rage Against the Machine say Peltier is innocent, he's innocent, right? So,
Mummy has had like the Beastie Boys support him,
There's a list of his supporters that is really a page long. You almost can't even list it. It's so chock full of celebrities that it's like which celebrity is not in there is probably easier to find. So I found it like in his case, I think I listed some people in my book that supported him. Susan Sarandon, Nelson Mandela.
She's on every list.
Right.
She's like Jason Flom.
Yeah, she wants to be first to sign. Desmond Tutu, Alec Baldwin, European Parliament, Amnesty International. So, and he was kind of faded too. Like he's like another person, maybe kind of like the Central Park Five. Like he got his own radio show, and he's the symbol.
Democracy Now! Has them on, and they've done terrible reporting on their reporting, Democracy Now! Is so poor on court cases. It's absurd.
No, it's bad, and I think that they don't even spend that much time on it, which is really bad. But I've seen Goodman sit with West Memphis with Damien Echols, and he's basically controlling her mind, just repeating every nonsensical axiom about the West Memphis Three, and he's just nodding along. It's incredible.
Oh, she just nods along. I've written her before I gave up. It was like when Hurricane Carter died, it was like this great man died. Damien Echols is saying he could be killed for a pack of chewing gum, and that's the ice cream truck outside. And she just looks at him like that's a totally normal and just nods. This is a Harvard graduate. Right. I mean, how do you leave Harvard that naive? How is that possible?
But don't you think that these cases are perceived within certain politics? So if you're on the left, these guys are, if they can convince you that they're part of that social movement, their crimes are of a lesser context, and then the same thing on the right. So some of these right wingers may have gotten a raw deal as well. I mean, don't you think people look at criminality through their own political prism?
Well, yeah, I live it with my family, and I mean, no one in my family listens to my show because it's taking they don't like it. They say things like, I don't know how you got so concerned. I'm not. I don't think I am particularly.
I got called progressive. I got called progressive the other day because I did an inquiry into Olaf Palme and said that the people who killed him were right wingers. I was just looking at the facts. So
yeah, that's an interesting case.
It is, and that's a criminal case. It's their JFK, but if you take certain positions, they'll just call you something. So I've been called a progressive and a conservative. I don't even know. I don't know. Like if I criticize Abu Jamal, I'm within that prism of I'm coming at it from a right-wing perspective instead of objective my attempt at objective, non-biased justice, like what really happened. So
what's up with Susan Sarandon when she named her kid after Jack Henry Abbott, who was in prison, killed a guy in prison when he was in there for forgery, then gets out with the help of Norman Mailer and Susan Sarandon, then 6 weeks later kills, I'm sorry, I can't remember his name, kills a waiter.
Richard Adan was
Thank you. Thank you so much.
In a restaurant bathroom, so Abbott, yeah. His book was In the Belly of the Beast.
in the belly of the beast. And I was just looking at footage from Norman Mailer talk about that, and he said, well, I don't consider myself, I don't consider the fact that, basically that I helped get him released was the problem. The problem was that he couldn't have a babysitter every day, every second of every day, to keep him from being violent. And that, and then he likened it to an alcoholic, like his addiction, Jack Henry Abbott's addiction to violence. He likened it to alcoholism, and saying that someone needed to stay with him every second of the day to make sure he didn't commit a violent crime.
Wow.
And because he couldn't do that, he takes responsibility. But he said, I had a great debt to him because he was so generous with his ideas for my book about Gary Gilmore, that I had to pay him back somehow. I don't think I'd ever be the same as someone that I got out of prison,
I don't know how they do
committed
it.
something like that.
I mean, especially like we were talking about crimes against the body. These people murdered people. Like, these are not drug crimes. Kardashian, to her credit, was involved in getting somebody out with a life sentence for drug crimes just recently. I forgot her name. But these are crimes against the body. And I mean, they should have known Abbott was trouble when he dedicated his book to Carl Pazram, who was like a notorious hyper-violent killer. So it's not very smart. Pazram was responsible for 21 deaths and additional rapes of men and women.
But don't you think naming your child after that? I mean, isn't that a different level than we're talking about?
There's something weird going on. I don't know what it is, especially with Sarandon, and why they feel the need to go. And I think it goes back to virtue signaling, too. I think that's it. If the system's unjust, if the system's too harsh, if these people didn't get a break. I would say that for these people who are in jail, I would say the system is working, that dangerous people are off the street. They've proven themselves to be dangerous, and that's why they deserve to be in jail.
Yeah, and that brings me to Mira Hindley, who's such an interesting case. We're just talking a little bit about that. She was someone who killed children with her boyfriend at the time, Ian Brady, in the 60s, and buried them in the moors, which is like a sort of rural area. And she had a lot of supporters when she was in prison. Some were, one was Janny Jones, who was a singer who was in prison herself with Myra Hindley for controlling prostitutes. And she hated Myra Hindley when she came in, but Hindley convinced her she had nothing to do with the crimes. And she also had Lord Longford, who was a very liberal politician, who went on shows and said that she should get parole, at least a shot at parole, and have the chance to be free because the judge had said that she was unlike Ian Brady, her boyfriend, in that she wasn't sociopathic, and without his influence, she might have never done these crimes, right? So, and she said she maintained her innocence, but there was always this audio tape of her abusing Leslie Ann Downey, one of their victims, and it was Myra's voice on the tape, not, Ian Brady's. And sort of when you got to that part of the conversation with her supporters, there's a few different videos on YouTube from that time where they're publicly advocating, Lord Longford is, and Janny Jones and a bunch of other people advocating for her release and squaring off with Ann West, who was Leslie Ann Downey's mother. And you can kind of see that they just shut down at the thought of the tape,
Interesting.
And what happened was that in the 80s, like 10 years later, she confessed to everything. And Janny Jones came out and said, I've been had. She's made a fool out of me. She's made out a fool of Lord Longford. And she's a very convincing liar. And I almost threw up when I heard that she had confessed everything. So it's just interesting that this continues on. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like with different bad effects, either they get someone out and someone else gets killed, another person kidnaps someone, or there's a lot of those kind of cases, or they end up looking foolish in their belief. Really, it's like almost like a religious belief, because it's not really based on anything except belief that that this person is telling you the truth. That's a convicted prisoner, right?
Right. I mean, I think it's
Sorry.
interesting. No, but I think that that's kind of what the courts are there in a rarefied sense, is to find out what the truth is. What are the facts? So when people contradict what the courts have gone through, what the police have found, what the prosecutor is able to use to obtain a conviction, you can only feel sorry for them that much, really, because there's other people whose job it is, you're paying your tax dollars to investigate and find out what's going on. There are checks and balances within the judicial system. So, yeah, but I mean, don't you think that some of these people, there's tons of West Memphis 3 followers who've got in touch with me and said, oh man, I supported him, I sent him money, I feel sorry about it now. So there are people who do acknowledge that they got had. And it's maybe too few and too far between, but there are people who do admit it.
That's a very hard thing to do, and I'm always interested. I mean, it's kind of a theme of my shows, talking to people who've changed their mind or change their thinking on any kind of significant way, because it's very hard to admit that you've been fooled or that you were wrong.
I agree.
You know? Yeah.
Well, I mean, the West Memphis 3, for example, I thought that there was something wrong when I first watched Paradise Lost, and then I heard that they got out, and I just went, oh, there must have been some kind of mistake within the trial. There must have been a technical problem or something when they got out. I had no idea what was going on, So people can get different impressions. It's like, what kind of information are they obtaining? So, but yeah, acknowledging that you got it wrong is, I think it's a tough one for a lot of people.
Yeah, I thank God for Ed Opperman. Was like really one of the few lone people out there producing any kind of material, about the West Memphis 3 being guilty. It was it was not easy to find.
No, not easy to do either, actually, to his credit.
True.
I mean, back in those days, it was you kind of invoked the fury, so to speak, by even saying that. So Ed has taken a lot of really great positions, long-form investigative positions that are really important. He puts them up anyway. He's done some great investigation, not just on the West Memphis 3, but on the Hampstead hoax and on other people who believe that, these are other hoaxes. There's one guy by the name, oh my gosh, why can I remember his name? People think that he was credible, but Ed puts up his interview with him, and it was also Transformation of America. So he's done some where he's exposed some of these stories that cannot be credible.
Yeah, that was a great interview he did with Kathy O'Brien and her husband.
She's asking
Fantastic.
her husband, what am I supposed to say? Oh, it was the most dangerous game and I was being hunted in the forest? Yeah, I was being hunted in the forest.
It was. It's really interesting. And I don't think it's hard to say the truth sometimes. I think my West Memphis 3 videos are just even maybe more downvoted than they are upvoted, at least pretty close to even at this point. And I still that's what I don't understand is when someone writes something like, oh, you just haven't, the reason that Miss Kelly's confessions, because I say it so many times that you cannot ignore the fact that there's more than, there's so many of them, weren't factual and were all made up. And that's how I know they've never listened to them, if they say that. I mean, it's just repeating the propaganda without even looking into it. I can't even imagine that.
Yeah, I mean, it's a shame. And I think some people can't tell the difference between PR and propaganda. I think that's very hard for some people. So there's kind of like a word soup or concept soup in their brain where they can't sort it out. Put one column of actual real facts and the other column of PR. I mean, I think I told you in one of our earliest talks, one of the people who complained to West Memphis 3 said, she wrote me something and said, I don't like your version of the facts.
That's amazing.
Yeah, it's incredible. So, anyway, so it's.
So, did we miss anyone big?
I don't think so. Who else is
George Davis?
Who's
How
George
about
Davis?
him?
Who's that?
He was a bank robber that Roger Daltrey of The Who wore a George Davis is innocent shirt on stage. He was released in 1976, and then he robbed another bank in 1978. So. Once again,
surprise.
I mean, it's just. I think they're all very, very interesting. These campaigns. I mean, I think we're really at the end of the Adnan. We're at the end of the Making a Murderer, series.
Yes, I think you're right.
And I'm just interested to see what Netflix comes up with next. Pretty much. Could you do this without Netflix or?
I don't know. I don't know. I'm trying to see what I think John Cryer, his production studio, is working on something, but I'm trying to do it on the fly, figure it out.
Remember that they were supposed to be doing a thing on OJ being innocent with
Yes.
Martin Sheen narrated, and that never came to fruition. So
Right.
I just wonder if we're kind of, maybe I'm deluded, but kind of at the top of the mountain, just starting to go over the peak of all this innocence fraud, maybe. On the way down, hopefully.
Hopefully it'll be down. I think that more people are kind of coming aware of the concept, so I think that's good. Let's see.
So do you think that and Satoya Brown, there's someone that Kim Kardashian helped get out, who I think is probably will reoffend and is dangerous. Oh, anyway, so I think we're close to the end. Did I miss anyone?
I don't think so. I think we're at 50 minutes. That's pretty
hefty.
Cool. Yeah, hefty.
So, where can people find you?
I'm on the internet. I'm on Facebook, Twitter, YouTube. My podcasts are all over that feature you prominently are all over. William Ramsey Investigates. So, if anybody wants to hear me drone on, I've been told that my podcasts are a cure for insomnia. So, if you need to get to bed.
Oh, thank you, William Ramsey. I appreciate it.
All right. Take care.
Okay.
Bye.